Welcome to the Government Contracting People Planning webinar. I am Blair Lewis, a Senior Manager in Archetype's Performance Management Practice, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's session. Today we are joined by three special guests, Colt Meraw from Baker Tilly, John Morehead, and Stephen Davis, both from Archetype. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Could you guys give us an introduction about yourself, provide a little background, and share some insights about the companies that you represent? And Colt, let's start with you since you're in the top left.
Thanks, Blair. I'm Colt Meraw. I work at Baker Tilly on the GovCon Technologies team. I've been with Baker Tilly a little over 2.5 years now. Before that, I came from the industry side, working at a government contractor, running the FP&A function, as well as pricing, financial systems, and business intelligence. GovCon Technologies at Baker Tilly, we specialize in delivering technical solutions for government contractors, ranging from ERPs and performance management solutions, business intelligence, robotic process automation, any of the technology that they might use for their processes and data.
Great. How about you, John?
Yeah. Hi, I'm John Morehead. I'm a vice president at Archetype Consulting. I've been doing CPM, EPM work for a little over a dozen years now. I've spent about the past 5.5, almost 6 years, pretty much exclusively in the OneStream space. Um, yeah, and I spent the past 2 years working a lot in the GovCon space, specifically a good amount with Colt here, talking about all the things that we learned. Hopefully, we can share with you today. Uh, Archetype has OneStream practice. We're a diamond partner. We've done a few hundred projects across 50-ish clients. Many of our clients obviously repeat with us and have like to come back because we've provided a lot of value to them. I think we're talking today a lot about some government contracting clients that exemplify that. We've done a few projects with them now, so we talk about the kind of the evolution of OneStream at a company and how it goes from initial implementation to all the way to full life cycle. So yeah, excited to be here today. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John. Steve?
Hi, Stephen Davis. I'm a senior director at Archetype Consulting. I've been in the CPM space for probably 15 years now. I head up our data integrations team. I've done everything in data integrations from database administration, ETL tools, work with APIs, XML, just all kinds of different data flows.
Great. Well, let's dive in. So this is the second webinar in our series about government contracting. So if you haven't listened to the other one, I highly recommend giving that one a listen. At the sake of being a little repetitive here, let's start it off, Colt, if you don't mind, by just sharing a little bit about the government contracting industry and some of the unique dynamics that it presents compared to other industries.
Yeah, sure. So, government contracting is essentially a sector that kind of crosses all the industries because the federal government buys pretty much everything. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to every other organizational budgeting process out there, using different budget methods to build up to their annual operating plan or their, recurring forecasts and or what if scenarios. The added complexity for government contractors comes with their need to conform they might come with their need to conform with specific compliance regulations and cost accounting standards. At any point, their systems could be audited to ensure that they're compliant with those, including their accounting, estimating, billing, purchasing, timekeeping, and inventory supply management systems. They need to be able to record and track direct costs and different types of indirect costs, as well as, from a compliance standpoint, allocate those costs to the correct benefit and cost objectives. So it's really about being able to track those different types of costs, estimate what they're going to be accurately, and allocate them out throughout the year, and making sure that those, assumptions you made in your budget are tying closely to actuals, so that way your budget stays in line with your expectations.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of add on to that a little bit, it's been our experience that, like Colt said, most of what a government contractor does is shared across most of the industries or sectors that you might see. Everyone needs to do basic budgeting, forecasting, even people planning, right? And people expenses are the biggest expense that everyone has, that any given company has. So it, while there are some differences, there are more similarities. So I think we found that it's been interesting to learn about the little things that make it a little bit different. But much like any other industry or sector or whatever you want to say, like manufacturing or professional services or retail, they've all got their little quirks, their little things that they need to do just so. And it's the same with government contracting. But again, most of it's shared, and the same approach that we have taken towards delivering those special needs, if you will, for each individual industry. We took the exact same approach with the government contracting sector, and it's played out really well.
Yeah, like I think it's just like an added layer from a compliance and cost accounting standpoint that you have to factor in.
Yeah, 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 that's fair.
So I've had the privilege of working in the government contracting sector for the past 6 months, but I wasn't in the space when this specific people planning project kicked off. So can you guys talk a little bit about how kind of this project came to life and what were some of the key business objectives that the clients were trying to achieve? I guess Colt, if you want to start us off here, and then John and Steve, you can chime in a little bit on the technical side.
For sure.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. So, like I said, we have a lot of clients that are government contractors, longstanding clients with Baker Tilly. We've been doing FP&A and performance management consulting for a long time. But OneStream has been this, up and coming tool that's really been growing in market share. And as we've been seeing more and more of our clients choose OneStream and move away from other performance management solutions, we saw that it was an opportunity for us to get into the OneStream space and help our clients, design, build, and test and deploy these kind of tailored solutions that they might need as a government contractor. And we had a historical relationship with Archetype that we basically built upon and decided, hey, let's partner with Archetype. They got the technical resources to do these, complex projects. So we've been partnering over the past few years and delivering solutions for government contractors.
Yeah, and what I would say, one of the reasons that I think that OneStream has been accelerating in its acceptance, particularly in the government contracting space, is its flexibility. Right. Again, as I talked about just a few minutes ago, it's called it too. There's those specific things that need to be configured, those specific requirements around cost accounting and indirect rate calculations and things like that. And OneStream just has the ability to meet those needs, those specific needs, in a way that is most intuitive, easy to understand, and easily maintainable from a client perspective. And again, that's been, I think, probably the single biggest power of OneStream across, again, all the industry sectors across the entire market, is its ability to not just deliver an amazing amount of functionality out of the box, but also to be flexible enough to accommodate those specific needs that you have, because they're important. You've got to do them, and they're doubly important in the GovCon space when you have to report to the federal government about this stuff, and how you get reimbursed and paid is based off of it. And so, I think we found that having that flexibility to address that challenge exactly as the client wants it to be addressed, to give them the exact amount of information in the way that they want to deal with it, has been one of the real powerful tools that OneStream has at its disposal.
Awesome. So I think you guys implement people planning, but one of the strengths that I think Archetype and Baker Tilly bring to this is some enhancements that you guys have added to the people planning solution to really help enhance that end user experience. And so, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about these enhancements and how they help end users and make the solution, more beneficial for our clients?
Of course. So to start with, let's talk about the register solution. So OneStream has a few different marketplace solutions that they call register solutions. And what that is if you think about just a database table of information that's brought into OneStream, for example, people planning, that table would be your employee information. It would have their salary information, bonus percentages, those type of things, what department they're in, what cost center they're in. We bring that register in, or that data into the register. Then we build calculations on top of that. That's what the OneStream people planning solution does. It allows you to build those calculations. One of the things we've done is built predefined calculations, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel for doing head count or other type of metrics like your transfers in and out. Those type of things are kind of built in. Then we have compensation, so you have your monthly salary that comes in. Some clients will want to take, hey, their yearly salary, divide that out by 12. That could be your calculation. Or you could say that I know that in January we have 3 paydays, but in February there's only 2. So we could say how many payments are in that month and divide out the total number of pay by that payments per month. So we're getting that monthly salary that's a little bit more accurate. Every client's different, but we have basic calculations built out so we can easily tailor them to the different clients. Taxes, we have FUTA, SUTA, FICA, for example, that will be your taxes, and then like 401k and other benefits. So we have these predefined calculations that are based not only on the time periods. Like I said, when we go back to months, we have to have this platform that John Morehead built that allows them to say, hey, we know that it's January, not just the first period, second period, third period. Based off this scenario, we can understand what that month is. Maybe, John, would you like to talk a little bit more about that calculations per period?
Sure, yeah. And this really links back to that point that I made earlier about flexibility, because the people planning solution is built to be as flexible as possible. So as Steve's kind of alluding to, it doesn't natively know anything about financial period association. It just what it calls calculation periods. And, one calculation period could be a month, it could be weeks, it could be quarters, it could be years, it could be whatever. Because again, the solution is supposed to be as flexible and adaptable as possible. And there's some recommended out of the box ways to let people planning know about that kind of association. But what we found is that by writing kind of one central rule that, like Steve said, actually looks at the scenario settings, like, for example, a forecast that starts in month 3, it helps people planning in every single part. We can build one rule and reuse it across all the different parts of people planning, from the display to the calculation to moving data to the cube. They could all reference the same logic that, again, is based on the configuration of the scenario that you've already set up. And so what it allows for is just a more seamless, again, kind of intuitive experience for people planning with as little maintenance as possible, so that admins and users can just use the system. And when they see the data, it makes sense. When they calculated the data, it makes sense. When they move it to the cube, it makes sense. And so, yeah, we found that to be one powerful example of something we could do that was usable at every single client. You can think of it as an accelerator, or as Archetype's intellectual property that we get to leverage at all of our clients. But it really helps us, again, deploy a useful people planning solution very quickly, and learn from all the work we've done at our previous clients to leverage for all our new clients.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, John, because I think depending on the client, it really depends on the level of detail that they want to get into, whether their business is people or maybe they're a manufacturing company with, more of a focus on COGS. And so I think that it's a really good point around the flexibility of people planning.
Yeah. And again, we tried to develop our framework to be flexible also. So these pre-built calcs, you can use them, you don't have to use them, right? As Steve said, the salary calculation is flexible enough to allow for multiple different ways of calculating, very easily based on what we've seen in very common things. So we try to kind of take all these lessons learned across all these clients across multiple industries and put them into one solution so it's easily configurable and usable.
So I know one thing. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead, Colt.
No, I was just going to tie it back to government contracting, but go ahead, Blair.
Okay. Well, I was going to move on here and talk about, I know one of the things, when talking with potential clients that are looking into a people planning solution or really moving any kind of their planning solution into OneStream is what is the hill that has to be climbed to get the data into the system? And I think sometimes that can feel very cumbersome, especially for a client that may have 10,000 employees or more. And so, Steve, since you are our data integration specialist here, do you want to share a little bit about how data gets into OneStream? And I think OneStream does a really good job of making it really simple for clients to do. And really, it isn't a huge hurdle to get across.
It's not. You're right, Blair. It's basically, I talked about that register, right? And that's the data that needs to come in. So we want to bring in all the employees or positions that we're going to calculate out the data to. And so we need to get those employees in for every month, or if we're doing a forecast, then you may be forecasting 12 times a year. You may be doing a budget once a year. And so we want to bring that register of known employees in and possibly bring in known future employees into that register. So there's a button that you click that allows you to bring in a spreadsheet template that you could actually have your users go into that spreadsheet and add those employees manually, or if you've dumped them out from a source system, then you put it into a spreadsheet, you upload that spreadsheet, and now it's in your register. That's one way. And most clients want that because they want to manipulate the data before it comes into OneStream, and they want to manipulate it manually. If you want like a more automated process, there's another button that you can click, and out of the box, that button doesn't do anything, but we can write code that would go get that data from an API from a source system, or it could go grab it from a database table. So that's where kind of the data integration point comes in. And OneStream makes it very easy to connect to a database or connect to an API by creating a business rule that would make that API call, grab the data, bring it over, put it into a data table, and then load it into that register. So depending on what your situation is, what the client wants, and how much they want to manipulate the data manually, depends on what the solution is for bringing that data in. But at the end of the day, it's relatively easy. It's more about, what hurdles we have to get to get to that data.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real strengths of OneStream is the amount of data that it can import and how quickly it can process, and you have the audit log of what was brought in and why. And from a people planning perspective, like Steve was saying, it can handle a large volume of data very easily. And that's one of the strengths of people planning as that register-based solution that Steve was talking about, it being table-based as opposed to dimension-based, or which is kind of the more traditional approach with these multidimensional tools. And again, this is an example of the flexibility of OneStream is the ability to use the relational tables alongside the cubes to really have both and use them in their best ways. And so for people planning, you can bring in a register of 10,000 employees, and it's just 10,000 records in a database. It's not 10,000 members in a dimension that then create hundreds of thousands or millions of potential cells in a cube that could become not performant and difficult to maintain, especially if you're have a decent amount of turnover. If you want to track potentially shift employees and stuff like that, it can be very cumbersome. Or if you have lots of changes and new hires in particular, maybe you're constantly moving new hires around, and meaning from a date perspective, which is pretty common, right? You plan to hire in January, but you don't hire until March, April, May, or you didn't plan to hire until May, but you found the perfect candidate in January, so you did it. And so again, that flexibility that people planning has to just store employees as a record that can easily shift, forecast over forecast or budget over budget, without having to worry about its impact again on a cube or on maintenance, it is one of the things that allows it to bring in such large volumes of data. Of course, it works the same with smaller volumes of data. If you've got less employees, it's just as much of a performance increase and a reduction in maintenance. But it really becomes a powerful tool for us to be able to leverage. And there's the additional benefit of the security that you get, because most of the time, most employers don't want all of their employee information just available in a cube, and so you've got to secure it. And by putting it in its own specific separate set of tables, you just have that ability to apply extra security to it and make sure that only the people that are supposed to see that data see it. And then when you move the data to the cube, it's at that summarized level, at your org, department, account level, whatever it might be, cost center level. And so you can be a little bit more open in the cube to allow people to slice and dice data and move around with slightly more permissive permissions and not be worried about exposing, protected information.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, Colt, I guess, can you share a little bit with us about how you've seen solutions be deployed to account for both direct planning costs and indirect planning costs, kind of the way that through people planning you can track those allocation of people's time?
Yeah, so I think you can obviously customize the people planning solution a lot of different ways. I think the out of the box functionality is great if you want to build up the by person costs and just kind of use it to build up the actual fringe expenses on your indirect side. So, accounting for the things like FICA, SUTA, 401k, health insurance, and getting really detailed in your build up to fringe expenses if that's your what you want to do and you want to see that build up by employee. But then you could also tailor the solution to think about it from like an percent allocation of time, right? So on the revenue generating side of the business, what you typically see is that those employees are spread across a bunch of different types of costs, right? So the majority of their time is direct charging to revenue generating services or direct charging to manufacturing orders if they're in the manufacturing business, right? And that's considered like counting toward their utilization. But you also have the percentage of their time that they spend, maybe writing proposals, BMP activities, or research and development, so charging to IRAD projects, or just general overhead time like professional services and other things or professional development, other things that you might be charging to overhead activities. So what you can do in people planning is instead of trying to build up the total cost of employee, you take those that people register and you basically assume percentages of their time across these indirect cost categories. And what that allows you to do is not have to do detailed project budgeting, not have to always go super high level on these like generic categories of indirect costs on the revenue generating side of the business, but instead actually have the detailed backup of, okay, well, here's what my roster was. Here was my expected departures and hires. And here is how I got to my buildup of all these overhead pools or all these G&A pools. And you basically have the supporting backup in detail coming from a true bottoms-up approach without having to get into detailed project budgeting on the indirect side, which a lot of organizations try to avoid. So getting back to what John and Steve were talking about, which is, okay, well, then how do you basically leverage the global drivers and leverage the calculations to automate a lot of stuff on the back end for the end users? So the end users just have to go in, they have to see that specific employee, put percentages in across these different categories, and then the logic in the back end is basically selecting that account, that org or cost center, that maybe that specific project that you want it to without the end users having to think about it. And they're just thinking about, what's my total percent out of 100% of their time across these categories?
Well, and again, just to kind of hopefully not to beat a dead horse too much, but we really at Archetype are very passionate about designing intuitive and easy user experiences around this stuff, because especially in large organizations, you have a lot of people using these. You want the system to enable easier usage, right? You want it to be such that it's almost at best invisible or helpful to help these people do their budgeting and their forecasting, because more than likely it's not their primary job. It's not the thing they think about the most or care about the most, especially in a distributed environment. And even if you have your finance team and they do care, they've got a lot of other responsibilities, and the more you can get off of their plate, the easier you can make it, the more value the tool provides, right? And that's kind of the idea, I think, of CPM tools in general. So it's a great example, Colt, I think, of leveraging the flexibility of OneStream to make something that's easy on the end users in a way that they understand and are familiar with.
Yeah, and not only easier on the end users, but then also easier if you happen to get audited and the government comes back and says, hey, I want some justification or I want some supporting detail of how you came up with these indirect cost pools, right? And these different categories. And you can actually go back and say, well, here's my out of the register, my by person assumption of their time for how much they're probably going to be spending on these different types of activities.
Yeah, very good point. Another strength of OneStream is its auditability, right? How much information it tracks about who did what, why, and the ability to spit that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you talked about project planning a little bit just a second ago, Colt, but can you talk about some of the synergies between deploying people planning and project planning simultaneously?
Oh,
I think we might have a little bit of an audio issue here.
Sorry.
Colt,
I
you're
think
on
it's,
mute.
yeah.
Sorry, Colt. So again, we were talking about people planning and project planning, both two very important components of an FP&A process. So can you talk about the synergies related to those?
Yeah, I think it's the main two things it gets back to is resource planning. So really understanding how much of a person's time you're budgeting against, and utilization, right? But in those tools specifically, right, on the project budgeting side, a lot of times what you see when you're actually doing detailed project budgets, it's mostly on the direct project side of the house or the revenue generating side of the house, where your project controllers or your project managers on a recurring basis are going in there into some tool, whether that's Excel or some other solution, and doing estimates to complete and estimates at complete to understand what they've spent so far, what's left on the project, how much money they have left, how it's going to spend out. And so if you can leverage that data, you're in a better place because you're already doing it anyways, right? And so the synergy there is, okay, well, if I'm doing all that on the direct side of the house, right, or my revenue generating side of the house, how does that tie back to what I'm just doing on the resource planning side for people planning, which is, hey, I'm making assumptions about these employees and how much time they're spending across these different types of overhead activities, right? So the full big picture is, hey, let me look at, even if it's just by org or even at the down individual resource level, how much am I assuming and people planning is left over for my revenue generating side of the business? And then how much on the project budgeting side am I actually assuming from an expense and revenue standpoint? And then how do they compare? Right. And so being able to use those two solutions simultaneously without having to do detailed project budgeting on the indirect side of the house and really have a good understanding of your assumptions for resources, your utilization expectations, it kind of just brings the two solutions to work kind of coherently with one another.
Makes sense.
yeah,
And I think both of us could probably talk about project planning for the next hour or two, because there's a whole lot of meat on that topic. And so we hope that if you're listening today, you'll join us for our next webinar, where we'll dive in deeper to project planning. But John, did you have a comment on that? I didn't mean to cut you off.
no. I was just agreeing with Colt that I think, again, just quickly, that's the benefit of OneStream as a platform, be able to have all of these tools share a common base for easy comparison and informing each other seamlessly because the data is all in one location.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us consultants are cut from the same mold, and we're chasing the next challenge. So I'm curious if you guys could talk about some of the challenges that you encountered in implementing people planning in the government contracting space, and how you guys were able to successfully resolve those to ensure success for our clients.
I'll talk about kind of the data side of every project. Is one of the hurdles that we have is really understanding the data that we're trying to get out of the system, because usually there's a source system, and so here we're grabbing project data and we're trying to pull these indirect costs and be able to, it may have 3 or 4 different sources, in order to take that indirect cost and merge them together, divide this number by that number. And that's where it really helps to have a partner like Baker Tilly. Colt, has been awesome on the different projects that we work on, because he really understands the clients and, how to grab the data, bring it in. This number needs to be multiplied by that number, divided by that number, added to this other number to get, the result for this report that we want to show. We can obviously, build the back end, more of the technical side of it, that I do. But when I get into that business logic and the government, space where there's all these regulations and things, not one of my finer points, and so it's great to have a partner like Colt to be able to come in and help us with that part of the project.
I'll
Yeah,
definitely
I think in
second that.
particular, it just like helps ensure success, right? Between Baker Tilly and Archetype, we can really alleviate a lot of burden on the client because between the two of us, we bring all the expertise we like needed to basically make sure we're defining requirements correctly, we're building all the calculations, the data integrations correctly, and just getting it done right the first time.
Yeah. And I think, to go back to your question about challenges, Blair, with people planning specifically, uh, often the challenge is just simply doing the first run of validations just to make sure that we've captured all the people and all of the stuff we need to run through a large volume usually of calculations to make sure that there's no, you want to test your full roster because you want to test all the little edge cases that you might bring up, which by the way is a great argument for simplifying wherever possible. I have to say, when it comes to people planning, my personal soapbox is always, I'd rather you guys be generally right than precisely wrong. From a forecasting perspective, because so much of the future is always in flux. And if you hire 10 people at a time you didn't expect, that's just that's way more impact than if your FICA calculation is cutting off at just the right time. But really taking on, making sure that you take the time to validate those calculations, across all the different employees and catch any maybe specific edge use cases on your calculations that you have, can always be a little bit of a challenge. Again, that's one of the great things about our enhancement set is that we've tested these calculations across dozens of clients at this point, so we have a lot of faith and we have ready-made templates for clients to use for validating those calculations, and so that really can help speed that up.
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys' insight today. People planning is a very flexible solution, as John said, and so we really just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. So, just any final thoughts that any of you guys have before we close here?
I mean, just
I
to
mean,
kind of quickly loop back. Oops, sorry, Colt.
no,
You go
yeah, you
first.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to loop back on what Steve said, I really have found, the partnership with Baker Tilly has been a really great synergy for us, because we have such depth of CPM and OneStream expertise and having seen a lot of things across so many different clients, and Colt and the team over there at Baker Tilly and the GovCon technology team specifically having so much understanding of the business processes of the GovCon space and how the other technologies work and interface, which has really allowed us to speed up our development time and really deliver quality projects much quicker than we might in other cases, because we've got a trusted partner who we can get very quick answers from, to help inform all this and guide the discussions with the client as well. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you, Colt.
agree. The partnership's just been, yeah, thank you. It's been fun working with you all. The partnership's been great from all angles, I will say. And we've kind of talked about some different ideas in terms of how different government contractors might use the people planning solution. But there's a ton of ways that we can custom tailor it for any client or prospect, trying to figure out what's the best solution for kind of building up their annual operating plan and their recurring forecast, especially if they want to do those people level, like people person level details from a budgeting standpoint.
Yeah, I've worked on over 15 different people planning projects now, and they're all vastly different. Every client has different, requirements, and gathering those requirements, really understanding it is, obviously the first hurdle. And but it doesn't seem like there's been a hurdle yet that OneStream hasn't been able to cover.
Well, Colt, John, Steve, thank you for your insights today and for sharing your experience with deploying OneStream to tackle the complexities in government contracting. If you're tuned in today and you're exploring people planning or a project budgeting solution, please feel free to reach out to Colt, John, Stephen, or myself. We're all eager to have any conversation with you to discuss your goals in the planning space and how we might be able to utilize the expertise through Baker Tilly and Archetype to assist you. In addition, we hope that you will join us for our next webinar series where we're going to go in depth with GovCon project planning. Thanks again for tuning in today.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.